What do you do? What do you do in the bath?
Hello lovelies, today we're going to be taking a look at Dragonbane by Free League. I apologise for the glare, it's either the glare off the shininess or you can't see anything at all. Now, I'm like a week late getting to reviewing this, I suppose, due to the vagaries of where they posted it all first and who backed the Kickstarter when, I suppose, but let's do it anyway, and hopefully my insights are as or more valuable than other people's insights. So let's see. So this comes in a box, which means you'd normally pay more in the UK due to the vagaries of our VAT laws. So if they do it separately as books, you might get more of a bargain there, depending how you feel about the rest of the stuff in the box. I don't know if they're doing a separate book version. I guess we'll find out. It calls itself Mirth and Mayhem Roleplaying. We'll come back to that. This is a nice box. It is very tough. It's got like a plasticated sort of wrap over it, and it's pretty sturdy. One of the big problems with boxed games is transporting them back and forth. Boxes don't tend to survive very well. I think this one will last a bit better than many. Free League have a game catalogue now with their various products listed in there. We'll see how some of them end up working out. You get a full set of dice, which is always nice to see, so you know that's good. Basic quality, clear green, but you know they do the job. You get a bunch of little stands for card figurines that you get with this, which is nice. Takes me back to Merp, which was like my first proper RPG, which came with a load of little cardboard figurines and little stands, and that was immensely useful as a young noob learning the game and still enamoured with battle maps and ending up using the same ones over and over and over again. But what you can do. So yeah, that's nice. We'll come back to that as well. Also comes with sets of cards. Now look, I like props, but it can feel a bit kind of fiddly in the moment. Yeah, I didn't open these yet. Let's see if I can actually get enough purchase to quickly open them now. There we go. See, I don't normally do unboxings, but I have already read through this, so. Alright, so you get a bunch of treasure cards, improvised weapon cards, and I think it's initiative cards at the bottom. Yeah, initiative. So, you know, like I say, I like props, but I am not utterly convinced that they're such a great idea in a lot of RPGs when you might be playing online where people can't have access to the physical props, or transporting stuff from place to place. The more bits and pieces you have, the more likely you are to lose them, or for them to get worn or damaged in one way or another. You know, they're nice, but I think mechanics that depend on them maybe aren't the best idea. Or if you're going to do mechanics that depend on physical items, it might be better to do it with physical items of which there are online analogues, like, I don't know, cards, you know, a standard card deck or a tarot deck or mahjong tiles or something. So these are adventure and more treasure cards. So the treasures relate to picking up specific kind of items and things and what they might be worth. And then adventures relates to specific locations, I believe. Yeah. So like rumours and places where adventures might be. Almost like a quest tracker in a computer game, I guess you could say. Alright. So then we have books and bits. An introductory sheet telling you what to read in what order. Kind of pointless, I suppose. But there you go. You also get a nice poster map of their sort of starting area with the names of all the backers on the back, which is nice. You get some pre-generated characters on the actual character sheets. So, you know, there's a nice visible handouts that you can give people if you're running a con game or a first sort of tester game, or if you're just you and your group's just learning how to play. So these are their iconics, I suppose. They're all illustrations from in the main book. You also get a couple of combat maps, or a double-sided combat map. So one for wilderness, one for dungeons, but no tiles or adventure-specific things, which if you're going to hand out those, I mean, I guess you can print and cut out your own, but still. And blank character sheets, which you're probably never going to use because they're too nice. Maybe they'll do pads of character sheets. I don't know. Yeah, so these are the cardboard tokens, and I hope they continue to do this on anything that they release, because you can just pop these out and stick them on the stands, and it's a nice, quick, easy, more transportable sort of thing to have. Oops, popping out without me wanting them to yet. But yeah, you get a good selection of baddies, player character types, you know, groups of goblins, all that sort of thing. Nice to have. I think they could have done with a couple more of those, but I really do hope that in future releases they keep up with the card tokens, or release card token sets, or something. As is tradition these days, we have some solo playing rules. They're a little bit vague, and the tables don't have an enormous number of options, but you know, it's a little guide for people who want to solo play, and that's actually a very old tradition for learning how to play the game. Normally that would be done in a choose your own adventure format, but not so much this time around. So that's there if you're into solo play. Oh, I never mean to insult people who do solo play. It's very weird to me. It doesn't scratch the itch that gaming scratches for me. Writing stories, that scratches the itch that solo gaming would for me. I might be an antisocial bastard, but for me, gaming as a group enterprise with all the unpredictability and so on that goes with it. You'd think as a forever GM and someone who enjoys GMing, maybe I would find that appealing too, but maybe it really is focused more on players than games masters, even though it makes demands of both sides of that for you. Maybe I can try using solo gaming as a way to generate stories. I don't know, but it's just that it doesn't appeal to me. I'm not calling you sad and lonely or whatever for solo playing. It just feels like there's this contradiction. Like it doesn't scratch the same itch as regular gaming, and it seems like with the internet and everything else, it should be so much easier to get a group together and play a game. and in fact, the rise of solo gaming seems to indicate the opposite. Excuse me a moment. Alright. So then we have some adventures, a sort of linked mini campaign book. You know, it's hard to review adventures, so I'm not going to really. I will note that the artwork in the adventure book is much less good than the artwork in the main core rules book, and it's got all these lovely maps which you can download online and print out, but which aren't in the box. So I imagine reusability is the reason, but still, it's a very basic sort of introductory chain of adventures. Take you a few sessions to play through. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly cromulent, but nothing special, you know. And I always regard adventures as a waste of space. However, in this instance, since this is clearly meant to be an introductory game set, and it's clearly aimed at a slightly younger audience, like an introductory audience, I think it's fine. You know, there's a necessity for this sort of thing there. How many people are going to start with Dragonbane? I don't know. I mean, it was the RPG in their home country, so it might play the role of, you know, basic D&D or whatever in that context. But for those of us outside the Scandinavian area, less so. Which isn't to say it's a bad idea as an introductory RPG. In fact, I would say it's a very good choice for an introductory RPG. Alright, so getting into the rules. I want to note something about the books first. They're not hardback, and the covers aren't as tough or plasticated as, say, the boxes or a lot of softcover books are. I would say it's less resilient than if you get a Lulu book with a gloss cover. The pages also, I have greasy skin, which is why people are always complaining about how dirty my fingernails are on my videos, and I found myself sticking to these pages a bit and worrying about the ink. So if you're a sweaty individual or someone with oily skin, you might just want to be careful reading through the books. And like I say, they don't feel that resilient. So it would be a great idea to create a rules cheat sheet, or maybe get a GM screen when it comes out to cut down on referencing the main book. So just being able to avoid that will make the books last a lot longer, I think. So it's not something that will stand up to regular reference usage, and I expect anyone who uses these books heavily will begin to end up with torn and crinkled and smudged versions of the book. It's a bit disappointing given the quality of the box and everything. You don't get a lot of game world background here. There were dragons, there were demons, they fought throughout history, they still fight, and in the chaos that they left, the younger races were able to rise. So you have reasons for dungeons in that either dragons have destroyed demon fortresses or demons have destroyed dragon fortresses, which is a nice little conceit on why there's dungeons for you to explore and everything else. And then there's intrigue between the various, humanoid races and so on. But there isn't a lot of background. And I don't have a problem with that. In fact, I like it, and I hope they don't create too much background for it. Now, you may have noticed the presence of ducks, or mallards, as they're called in this. Why do they exist within this game when they're only otherwise ever seen in RuneQuest? Because Dragonbane was originally an implementation of RuneQuest, or Drakon and Demona, or whatever it was. That's why there's ducks. It has, however, developed on a wildly different angle than RuneQuest was. So it's no longer that, but those of us in the know will see elements of the RuneQuest setting and blend of BRP rules here and there throughout the book. Characters are defined by their kin and their profession primarily, and then as they develop, you increase your stats, increase your skills, and get access to new hero abilities. That's how you rank up. So it's not really a class and level system, but it is a class system that expands slowly and depending on roles and things that you make. So skills advance in a similar way to BRP. You can tick certain skills, then you roll. If you get over the number, then your skill increases. If you get under, it doesn't. So it's a more organic way of building your characters, but you get to choose where you put those experience points to provoke those rolls. So it's a kind of halfway house. It's a halfway house between a lot of different ideas and things, but it is fairly simple. So your kin doesn't make a huge difference to your characters. Each kin type basically gets a different movement rate, perhaps, and access to a special ability. Special abilities are triggered by spending willpower points, which are dependent on your will stat. You also use that for casting magic and so on. But each race has at least one special capability that they can tap into. Otherwise, there's not a huge amount about any of them that really makes that big of a difference. Which is okay, I guess. I like to have these things be more meaningful. Like, stats should probably be different for smaller creatures than they are for bigger creatures, but you could always, add some extra capabilities, like giving Wolfkin natural weapons or boosts to their stamina or whatever they call it in this. I forget the exact name. You could customize that fairly easily, but it is selling itself on simplicity. So I don't know that this is the same kind of choice that has been made in 5th edition D&D to make kin, race, whatever you want to call it, mean less. I think it's more to do with keeping simplicity. But you can always house rule and complicate things. It is worth noting these tables. They got tables for names, but very few options. I felt like these tables could have been bigger and thereby have contained more inspiration, because once you know what type of name is associated with a kin, you can riff off it, right? So it doesn't have to be the exact thing that you rolled if you've got a large number of options. But in these cases, there's so few options that you can't really grasp onto any meaningful variations that might exist. So professions. There are 10 professions in the basic book. Artisan, Bard, Fighter, Hunter, Knight, Mage, Mariner, Merchant, Scholar, and Thief. Now, some of these aren't typical adventuring professions, such as the Artisan and the Merchant, but that kind of shows that the game is meant to be played in a slightly different way to what we might think of as normal and traditional sort of fantasy options. It made me think of Riotana a bit because of that. Your profession determines your starting equipment somewhat randomly. A nickname, again, not enough options. Tells you what your main important attribute is and provides you with a list of starting skills and a starting heroic ability. Heroic abilities are these special things that you can tap into. So, yeah, these are all fairly basic and normal, apart from mages, because magic is always a complication. Magic in this isn't too complicated, though, and it's fueled by will, the same as your special abilities, so it's a bit more flexible and different, I suppose. How your character starts out doesn't have to be how they end up, but it does give you your main sort of central track. You can learn the kinds of special abilities that other character types have through play. So it is a lot more open than other class games, but a lot will depend on your games master. One thing I did appreciate was the option to play characters of different ages, which gives you access to additional trained skills and has certain effects on your statistics. So younger characters get bonuses to certain statistics, older characters get penalties and bonuses to certain statistics. Your attributes, there's 6 of them, which would be familiar. They are named slightly differently in some cases. You have strength, you have constitution, you have agility, you have intelligence, you have willpower, and you have charisma. So obviously that's pretty familiar. Agility roughly corresponds to dexterity. Willpower roughly corresponds to wisdom. The rest is familiar. The range is the usual 46 drop 1. So, there's a lot of stuff that's tiresomely familiar if you're a D&D player. But I guess at this point you might as well use the common language of games in some ways, and it does help make this an introductory RPG to the more typical, I suppose. Movement rate is largely determined by your character racial type, not necessarily hugely balanced, but your agility also influences your movements. So if you're high agility, you're going to be faster. If you're low agility, you're going to be slower. If you're a clumsy asshole and one of the short-statured people, you might only be moving 4 meters in a round of combat. So you might be pretty slow. Damage bonus, close damage bonus is based on strength. Range damage bonus is based on agility. Agility is still a bit of a god stat, as usually happens, and those give you bonus to the damage dice that you roll. Hit points is based off your constitution, and that can go up when you get more heroic abilities. Willpower points is based on your will, but again that can be raised as you get more special abilities, so your magicians can fire off plenty of magic, and it's basically a magic point system and a hero point system, which all basically uses the same mechanics, so that's fine. Skills have bounds within which you have a base chance. Again, this will be familiar to basic role-playing players, where your stat gives you a base percentage on a lot of skills, and then skills that you're trained in have double the base chance. So that's the most important thing, I suppose. Rather than rolling and adding a bonus and trying to get over a number, you're trying to get under a number. So 1s are crits, 20s are botches in this system. So say you've got a stat at 18, that's going to give you a base chance of 7. So 35% odds of succeeding on an unmodified normal roll. If you're skilled in it, that's going to be 14 as a starting skill. So that's a 70% chance of succeeding. And skills can go up fairly easily, somewhat easily as you go along. So you will get better and better. Secondary skills are things like schools of magic and so on. Those don't have chances, though they say expansions may change that, but rather they give you access to certain capabilities. Heroic abilities are somewhere between feats and spells. It all kind of uses the same sort of mechanics. Each hero also has a weakness, which is mostly just a role-playing hint. So when you're going for experience, you get advancement marks based on what you've done during the session. So did you participate? You showed up, cool. Did you explore somewhere new? Sure, cool. Did you defeat one or more dangerous adversaries? Sure. Did you overcome an obstacle without using force? So it's encouraging the players into a certain style of play. You could modify that, of course, to encourage different kinds of play in your games. And did you give in to your weakness? That's optional, but that could give you more experience. That encourages people to play the flaws in their characters, which is always nice to see. I still think Deadlands did it best when it comes to that. Then you get to make your advancement rolls. So I've got a skill of 14. I rolled an 18. My skill goes up. Awesome. So it goes up by 1 if you do that. The maximum level for any skill is 18. You can also get an additional tick if you get someone to teach you intensively, so you might have to pay for that, or maybe one of the other players could train you. Magic skills can be improved, but if you want to learn new spells and new types of magic, then you need special training, which is in a separate section. You can learn new heroic abilities whenever you get skill level to 18. So you can then choose one. And if you succeed at a grand heroic deed of some kind, the Games Master or the adventurer, in a published case, I suppose, can give you a special heroic ability based upon that. But the different special abilities, they kind of operate like feats in some cases, so you have to have the skill capability in order to access it. Boons and Banes, that's advantage and disadvantage, but you can have multiples. So take the highest if it's a Bane, 15. Take the lowest if it's a boon, 1, crit success. Right, but you can have more than one of each, which starts to sort of drastically affect the chances. So that's something. Helping, someone helps you, you can be given a boon. If you're opposed, it's if you succeed, if you both succeed, and it's whoever gets the lowest number, and so on. The skill list is a thing that exists. They're fairly broad skills, which isn't a problem in a fairly light game like this. It does break down different combat skills, though, which I prefer, but maybe that's a complication for what's meant to be an introductory game. Heroic abilities, they're all fairly simple. It's just the requirements are a little bit fiddly, and how much in terms of willpower points they cost. That can be a bit fiddly if you're trying to make your own, and there's certainly not that many in here. But again, this is a starter box. I'm sure they'll expand on that over time. In combat, you get 2 actions per turn. Typically move and an action. You can use your action to move again. You can use your action to do various other things. You can react during your turn, but that uses up your action. So typically the way this will work is you have your initiative card out in front of you. That determines when you act in the turn. On your turn, you flip your card and do your actions, or if you react, you flip your card. So obviously you don't then act when it comes to your turn. You've done something, so you're kind of screwed there, really. There's various implications of various aspects of combat. It's mostly pretty typical. If you do hit, then you roll damage and you take away the armor score, and then whatever's left is applied as hit points to the enemy. If you're reduced to 0 hit points, you start dying. It's going to be fairly familiar to people who play D&D. It's basically the same. You get 3 death rolls, 3 successes, you stabilize, 3 failures, you die. Bit too forgiving, but again, it's an introductory game. It's more forgivable here. If you are reduced to 0 hit points but survive, you may suffer a permanent injury. You can also, they do love their push mechanic, so if you fail at something you can push yourself, but after you push yourself you suffer a condition related usually to the stat that you've used, and that means you have disadvantage on all rolls on that stat until you get a rest. So that's something. I'm trying to remember if there were any modifiers to the skill rolls besides Boon and Bane. I don't think I saw one. Boon and Bane seems to be the main thing, though you could always, improvise difficulty levels and so on beyond Boons and Banes if you really wanted to. But it seems like they're trying to keep things very, very simple there. Magic's fairly simple. It does require you to do this kind of Vancian spell preparation, which is equal to your base chance for your intelligence. So the higher your intelligence, the more spells you can have ready at any time. Hopefully they'll come up with spell cards to make that a bit easier for people who are playing around the table. A lot of the usual typical limits on magic. So like wearing armor is a bit tricky for mages. You get cantrips, kind of, but they still cost you willpower to use. So basically it's the level of the spell plus 1 is how many willpower points it takes to cast it. And if it doesn't state it, it's always at least 2 willpower. So you've got a fairly limited number of spells, and spell preparation is kind of annoying. Again, you can house rule that fairly easily, but it would prepare people on a more basic level for playing something more complex like D&D 5e. I kind of wish they'd gone their own way, but I don't know the history of the game prior to this edition, so maybe that's following how things used to be. RuneQuest, as far as I remember, always used to be a bit more open about spells, but hey, there you go. If you screw up your magic, weird shit can happen. Spell list is fairly Spartan, fairly sparse, but there are different schools of magic, as well as more general magic. It's enough. I think it's fine. There's plenty of stuff there, and like the heroic abilities, it wouldn't be too difficult to create new ones. Though I do feel that judging what power level and how much willpower it costs and so on, it's a bit more tricky. But you can riff off the spells that exist to make others if you want. So typical damages for weapons and things, like a heavy crossbow can do 2d8 damage. Keeping in mind that your average character is going to have 11 health. 2d8 is a pretty good chance of taking out an average NPC on a single hit. So yeah, it says mirth and mayhem. I think it tends slightly more towards the mayhem than the mirth, to be honest. Monsters are kind of interesting. So big monsters always succeed when they attack. And what you do is you randomly determine what kind of attack they're going to do, which is something I've toyed with as an idea for doing some of these creatures in other games. It does, however, strike me as a little bit unfair, because you only get the one reaction. If one of these things attacks you, the only hope you've got is to dodge or parry, which is going to use your action, which could get rather annoying. Though it does create a new role for a tank character in that they can engage and ward off attacks while the others do their level best to harm whatever creature it is. It's a fairly limited bestiary, but NPCs follow more conventional character rules instead of being treated as monsters. Monsters are a special exception, so things like goblins and orcs and so on, they follow the same rules as characters. So there is scope there for doing something differently, or even for turning the non-player character types into playable races relatively easily. But you know, the basics are there. Ghosts, orcs, goblins, trolls, that sort of thing. There's enough, and there's some extra stuff in the adventure book as well, should you need it. It's a fairly nice section about sort of overland adventures, travelling, survival, that sort of thing. There's a very nice, quick, easy section of NPC stats for typical things that you might run into, bandits, for example. You know, that's all fairly welcome and simple, and something that a lot more games could do with. A little bit of advice on creating adventures, nothing any veteran is going to find hugely useful, but plenty to riff off again. And then some tables with some ideas for travel and everything else. So, what do I think? In terms of style, yeah, it's a nice box. They're nice books, though I think the overall design for toughness leaves something to be desired. The illustrations by Johan Egerkrans are really good. Look up his work online. Whoever did the other artwork in the adventure book is less good, less characterful, outside that kind of style. But I know the pitfalls of employing a single artist to do everything. There's not a lot of mirth. I didn't laugh once reading any of this, so I think if they want to make it include mirth as well as mayhem, I think there's some work to be done on presenting the rest of it. Otherwise, it's clear, simple, easy. The game world is implicit rather than explicit, which actually I think is a good thing, because it leaves it open for you to create and map your own game world outside of whatever setting previously existed. So I kind of hope they don't go against that as things move forward. I would give it a 5 for style, but the book design, it's just not that practical, and that's a problem for me. So I'm going to drop the style to a 4. In terms of substance, I mean, it's not the kind of huge tome that we're used to these days. I mean, this is just over 100 pages. That's probably slightly smaller. There's stuff there, but it's not enough. Sorry, I was interrupted by loud oompa music from the Village Fate today. To recap then, in terms of style, I would have given it a 5, but the art in the adventure book and the materials used in these books makes me drop it to a 4, unfortunately. Also, there's not a huge amount of background detail and so on. I think that's a strength of the game, but normally my style scores are partially based on the lore and so on that you might see within a book, but not in this case. But I think that's actually a strength. In terms of substance, the adventures are always a waste to me, but in this context, maybe not so much. You've got everything you really need to start playing, in that you have your dice, you have your little card figurines, you have your character sheets, you have an adventure you can play, you have a solo adventure guidebook that you can use to play by yourself, and you've got the core book, which has enough to play. It's just a more seasoned role player perhaps would want more options and so on. So all of that taken into account, I think in terms of substance we're looking probably at a 4 as well. So that's 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5. However, I'm going to make a special exception I think this is a nearly perfect starting RPG. If you don't want your kids to start with D&D, if you want to broaden their horizons beyond D&D while still teaching them concepts which will carry across, if you want to get them started onto something else, then I think this is the perfect starter RPG. Everything's in the box, everything you need. As a parent wanting to run for kids, you've got enough here. If your kid is a precocious 8-year-old or a normal, 10, 11, 12-year-old, I think you're going to be kind of set with this. Hopefully they support it a lot. So in that context, I would give it a 5 out of 5, a 10 out of 10. It's a perfect starter RPG. I think my only real complaint is the comedy doesn't come through. The humour doesn't come through. It's meant to be mirth and mayhem, but the comedy side suffers. I mean, ducks are kind of inherently ridiculous, unless you're into the non-filmic Howard the Duck. But these come across more like sort of Donald, angry, frenzied, and Disney's a lot more popular in mainland Europe and Scandinavia than it is here in the UK, so maybe that will help explain the influence. And it's a weird holdover from RuneQuest, but there you go. 4 out of 5, worth picking up, I think, for insights into other countries' history of role-playing. And if you're looking for a starter RPG, you could do a lot worse. This is definitely a good choice for that. Zang. Pulp Nova is a collection of short stories in the old pulp style but with a modern twist. You should find something here you like, from western to mythos horror to science fiction. You can get Pulp Nova at Drive-Thru Fiction, on Amazon, or in hard copy from lulu.com.